Gary Hutton, one of the most interesting people I've come across in a long time. I've just interviewed you for my forthcoming book. There's something about Whitechapel.
That's correct.
And you, you know, I didn't really know where to start, begin, or end. You're just literally, you're an absolute river of East End knowledge. You know what? A lot of my friends can't understand me because I actually holiday. I grew up in Middlesbrough, and
Right.
I actually holiday in Whitechapel. So I was at Whitechapel twice last year. You know, the wife said, "Oh, we'll go this, we'll go." No. And I go to London a few times a year just to hang around Whitechapel, Commercial Road.
Yeah.
Just you know, and I'm absolutely obsessed with the place. But
it's a wealth of history.
Yeah, but you know what? Predominantly, the most of people, when you think of Whitechapel, I know it's probably going to annoy you, but when a lot of people think of Whitechapel, you think of Jack the Ripper. Listen, that's been going for 134 years now. But why is? I mean, listen, as someone who was born and bred in Whitechapel, you're an author. I'm going to put a lot of your links on after this. You've written books. You're involved in a lot of things, charities. But can you understand why? Yeah, can you understand though why a lot of people will only be interested in Whitechapel because of the Whitechapel killings all them years ago?
No, I don't get it. I've never got it. I've never understood it. So as a kid, you'd see hordes of tourists being, you know, led around the streets of Whitechapel, you know, to the murder scenes. I never understood it. I never got it. But I suppose if I grew up somewhere else, it would be interesting. For me, there's so much history in Whitechapel that I just can't get enough of it. I just can't get enough of it. But I'm not too interested, and I don't think anyone else from Whitechapel is interested in Jack the Ripper per se. You know what I mean? It's not something that we all like. It happened, okay.
Yeah.
And it's you know it's part of the history, but it's not something, you know, local people are that interested much.
Do you know what? Pardon the pun. It's a business or an industry that makes a killing. So
Yeah.
you've seen all the books, over 200 books. You've seen the films. You've seen the documentaries. Dramas. And listen, I mean, I'm obsessed. I got obsessed with Jack the Ripper when I was about 10 or 11, and I'm 41 now, and it's never ever left me. But you know what? I'm surprised.
No, it's an interesting story. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, Gary. What I was going to say is, I was surprised that you told me the people on Bethnal Green and Whitechapel and Hackney, they don't subscribe to Jack the Ripper, the craze. So someone like you, who, you know, you're from there, what are people's opinions on it?
So, so Jack the Ripper, once upon a time on the streets of Whitechapel, a few prostitutes got murdered. But see, there's always been prostitutes up until to the present day. There's still prostitutes around there. They're probably getting an iodine, you know, beaten and all sorts of things. You know, it's still not so much the murder, but it's, you know, it still goes on. As far as the craze and things like that, people from the East End are not the worst, you know, the worshippers of the craze. That's left to people outside. They're just two blokes from Balance Road that was violent, you know. But their story, see, same as the Jack the Ripper. It's interesting. It's an interesting story if you get into it. The craze is an interesting story if you get into it. You know, two twins. You know, and then there's wife tales and things like that. And you know, if you believed after things you believe, they run the whole country. You know, as far up as, you know, Scotland. But yeah, it's some of it's mythical, but yeah, it's just two geezers out of Balance Road, and we're never going to know Jack the Ripper is.
No, absolutely. Do you know what? There's 200 suspects, and there's probably 15 to 20, 24 serious, elite, heavyweight suspects that I could tell you a story, Gary, and you'd say, right, I found Jack the Ripper, and then I could go on to the next one, and you'd think the same. So when you were
the best
growing
one
up,
for me. Sorry, the best one for me is a young bloke. He was working in a morgue in just off of Old Montague Street. There used to be a morgue at that time, and he was interested in the anatomy and all things like that, learning about it. I don't know if you heard about that one. Have you heard about that one?
Oh yeah.
That would be the one for me.
There's some completely farcical, ludicrous members of the royal family. You know, that didn't even come out until the 70s, 90 years after it. The Elephant Man, Oscar Wilde, Walter Sickert, and there's some absolutely like, you just give us a break, mate. But listen, these are the things that make films and documentaries. But for a young kid like yourself, who was, you know, proper Cockney as they come, did you grow up hearing the stories of the Krays and Jack the Rippers? So did you grow up with your nanas talking about all this kind of thing?
So you heard people talking about it, but you never really related to it. Do you know what I mean? You heard about Jack the Ripper, but you never related to it because, and the same as the Krays, you know, there was two blokes that lived in Balance Road that's now doing 30 years in prison. Okay. You know what I mean? So there was so much going on in my life growing up. I never really took any advantage of history whatsoever. You know, as I said to you before, school was somewhere to eat, to go and, you know, to go and eat because they're giving away free food. I never took part in academia. But then afterwards, later on in life, I just can't stop taking in history. And so, but a lot of it I knew about as a kid, but I never took no notice of it. And so then I've just picked it up later on in life and just gone crazy and divulged and dived into the history of Whitechapel in the East End.
Wes is just asking you a question, Gary. How dangerous actually was Whitechapel on a night in those days? Compare it to the dangerous area today in society, or is it still as bad?
Well, so I struggle when I go round there of an evening. I see young women walking along by themselves along Brick Lane. And I think, what are they doing? You know, because the 70s, the 80s, once it got dark, you never saw a woman walking along Brick Lane or Commercial Road on her own, unless she was a brass. You know, you didn't walk along now. It was dangerous. Do you know what I mean? It was dangerous. There were so many waifs and strays from all over the place. So you'd have people that their lives fell apart. They'll end up drinking on the street. There was lots of, you know, wine drinkers drinking methylated spirits, you know, around Brick Lane and outside Christchurch. So Christchurch, there's a park next door called Itchy Park, and it's
that was the song from the Small Faces.
Yeah, and so no, that was Itchycoo Park. That was in East London. There's two different places. So the East End, right next to Christchurch, the church, is a park called Itchy Park. And so Itchy Park, it got the name for a reason, because all the waifs and strays of life who fell out homeless at the time, even in Jack the Ripper time, they was, you know, sleeping in there, and they would all be itching. So it become locally known as Itchy Park. Well, in fact, every park around there become known as Itchy Park. But, you know, in the 70s, the 80s, you know, what we call methos, they was drinking methylated spirits out of a bottle, sitting there drinking. So, and you had, you know, Bufas, which is the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army was founded in Whitechapel. And so you had waifs and strays dropping out of their life, turning up in Whitechapel. So it was a dangerous place. It was a mixture of absolutely everything. But it was a very interesting place to grow up.
Dr. Bernardo's come from the East End as well, didn't he?
Yeah. So there's a road in Stepney called Bernardo's, Bernardo Gardens. So that's where they had their you know, children's home, Bernardo's children's home. That's where it first started. So yeah, a lot started there. You know, so there was a wealthy woman. She lived in Hampstead. Hampstead Heath is really wealthy, and she wanted to give back to the poor. So she ended up in Whitechapel, and she was going around the houses, and she could see that their animals, their horses, and that was like in need of something. You know, they needed some help. And so she started up the not the RSPCA, the other one. I can't remember which one it's called now, but she started up a very well-known animal charity sanctuary thing. And that, a lot started in Whitechapel. Because if you think, London wasn't that big back then. And so the East End grew up, you know, from the smelly industries around the city. They didn't want them in there. And so all the industry grew up, you know, back in the day, that part of Brick Lane, there's a big plaque on a school at Christchurch on Brick Lane, which says this was Middlesex.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and the East End grew up out of a field and smelly industries like the brewery, tanning, you know, and then it just built up.
Gary, can you tell people listening, there's a lot of things in the East End, you know, Middlesbrough is associated with the Parmesan, obviously, you know, but the East End pie and mash, where does that, I mean, I know, but, you know, I mean, jelly deals, what is it with the Cockneys? Where does that come from?
So it's almost now becomes like snobbery, because you know I've seen people eating it with gravy, and I'm like, what is that about?
Have you actually ever had it? Because it looks like dog food.
What, with gravy?
No, have you had like jelly deals and all that?
Oh yeah, so I would eat pie and mash like you go into a cafe and have bacon, egg, sausage, chips, and beans.
Even so, is it still going now? Like every Londoners go mad. Is it like piss head to a curry or piss head?
There's so they shut early though. So they open up early in the morning. They're shut by 2:30. Some of them in a weekday. So you go in there early and eat it early, but it never tastes the same if you take it home takeaway. It never tastes the same. So you could go into a pie mash shop and you could eat it, and it's absolutely lovely. But there's and you take it home and it just doesn't taste the same. But there's like a tradition. So I'll eat in a couple now and then if I fancy it, but mainly I would just use R&S Kelly on Bethnal Green Road. I wouldn't go in any other pie mash shop. I've walked out of pie mash shops when they put it on a plate and served me. I've looked at it and gone, I ain't eating that. So it's like a snobbery. You almost become like, I'll only eat out of there. I won't eat out of anywhere else. But it's what you've grown up on, that shop, and you'll go there. Someone will say to me, oh, the pie mash shop down Roman Road's the best one ever. And I will go, you're joking. I've tasted it. I'll go, you're joking. Because for me, it's S&R Kelly, and it will only be S&R Kelly's. But there's a little bit of snobbery about it now. But it was just a cheap food for poor people. So potatoes was being sold on the streets, and then someone put a pie with it, and then they put the liquor, which is traditionally made from the eels, the boiling of the eel juice, and and then a little bit of parsley. I actually make it myself. I've done a live during lockdown and showed everyone how to make it, and it looked pucker, and it tasted even better.
There's a question for you, Gary. Making Gaines, good friend of mine. So he's asking, do you like how London's changed, or did you prefer it back in the 70s? And that does it hurt your eyes, or have you moved the time?
So the other day I was walking around Brick Lane, and I was doing a documentary thing, and I was looking about, and I was, once upon a time I could walk along Brick Lane or any road around there, Whitechapel, Bethnal Green, Commercial Road, and you'd see untold people that you knew. Now you feel like you're a foreigner because the dynamics have changed of the area. You can't actually afford to live there. It's really expensive, that part of the East End. So all these like hipsters are coming in. They're in the .com world, the TV world, or at university somewhere around there, and daddy's paying for a flat because you couldn't actually afford to buy a flat around there. It's like it's crazy, but there's bits of the East End is still there. The pub industry, like walking into an old East End pub, you'd be pushed to find an old East End pub where you'd walk in there, and it's an old East End pub. you find it hard now. They're all closing. You know, most of them are turned into chicken shops or a restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know
something? A lot.
I'd never had bagels, and I purposely 6 months ago kept myself to go and have the first one on Brick Lane, and it was unbelievable. It was a proper experience for me. So in a couple of months,
I've got to correct you. And if I don't correct you, people will be saying, Gary, why didn't you correct him? So if you've been eating what you said you've been eating, the way you pronounced it, you've been eating American rolls. So it's Beigel, not bagel, Beigel.
Right.
And it's spelt completely different. So how the Beigel come about? It's a Jewish delicacy. And so in Poland, it was given to pregnant women who was just about to go into labor as like a, you know, a gift. And so when the Jews come into England, hundreds of years ago, they brought all their food with them. And so a Beigel is actually Jewish, it's Polish Jews.
Is it really?
And so, yeah, and then the salt beef that you get in it, so that was to prolong the meat. They weren't putting salt in it because it tastes nice. It prolonged it. You could have it for a couple of weeks. But now it's like £5.50 for a Beigel.
Another question for you, Gary. So what's the dynamics at the Underworld in London now? And did you have any experience with the craze? I spoke to you earlier. So you grew up and you heard the name. But what's your opinion on that?
So I heard the name, but I heard a lot of people's names, you know, growing up. I never connected to it. I didn't, you know, it wasn't something that, you know, these people was in prison, you know, and everyone that was with them, some of them, when I say with them, there was a firm, wasn't there, or something? That wasn't really a firm, and you might have been there one night when they done something. But yeah, and then that all expanded or whatever. But yeah, it's not something that I worship and go, yeah, all this. I got no. It's not something I would read anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's not so. Yeah, because it's been glamorized too much. Do you know what I mean? And the industry that I work in, I'm trying to save kids from. So you have to spend 25 years or 15 to 25 years in prison now to be classed as a gangster.
Yeah.
Oh my God, who wants to be a gangster? Do you know what I mean? If you're looking up for people who's going to spend the rest of their life in prison, you need to have a serious check. Yeah,
and we're going to go into that a bit later about what you actually do.
Yeah.
So Wes is asking, where in today's Whitechapel is the most similar to how it was in 1888? I probably would say it's Gunthorpe Street. You know, you can look at that, and that's like going back to 1888, or even somewhere like Fournier Street.
I would say Fournier Street and Wilk Street and Prince Allet Street is a little like, you know, I would say that's the most. Gunthorpe Street, if you're looking from the arch from Whitechapel High Street, then it looks like a scene of a Jack the Ripper murder. But when you walk down it, apart from the school, all the rest of it's new. You know, they've still got the cobbled streets, but I would say Fournier Street, Wilk Street, and Prince Allet Street would be, you know, that would be where I would walk round and just have a look to because the church was there. Christ Church was there.
Yeah,
I would say there. And also as well, Artillery Passage.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly the same.
Yeah, Artillery Passage. I would say, you know, them two. Gunthorpe Street, not for me. Do you know what I mean? Apart from the alleyway that starts it off, it's almost new.
Yeah. Can I ask you? Obviously, people watching, and I'm going to share this to a lot of pages later. But why does the East End, right, particularly identify with pugilism? If anyone doesn't know what pugilism, it's it's boxing. So the East End, a lot of people I know, your John L. Gardners, Nigel Benns, Kevin Mitchell, they've all fought themselves out of the concrete jungle, which is the East End. Your Lenny McLean's, your Roy Shaws. What's your opinion on why the East End? I mean, the York Hall, Bethnal Green is the home of Steve Bunn says well boxing. But
yeah.
What's your opinion on it, Gary?
So I actually put a show on there, a boxing show. So
right.
Yeah, no, the history of it is absolutely brilliant. But for me, it comes out of poverty, and so you strive to do better. And if you've got a little bit about you and you can hold yourself in the ring and you're susceptible to, being taught, mentally, physically, it's great. Because, if you go in there, it takes the worries of the world. If you go in the gym, it takes away the worries of the world. And a lot of people at the East End at a certain time, in a period of time, just wanted to better themselves. And if it wasn't crime, it was boxing or football. And so, yeah, and then once you've developed the passion for it, your life's taking off because you eat better, you're mentally prepared, you're physically better, and it's just wanting to better yourself. So a lot of young kids take it up just to better themselves.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of gyms. I pop down all the time, and I pop in Matthew Burke's gym, Left Hook, it's in Wapping, just near the Archway. But predominantly the East End is the main ones known as the Repton. Tony Burns, Davy Robinson. I interviewed Davy for a book, the chairman of the Repton, of about 45 years now. But if you're involved in the Repton, they do more than just train you. They get you jobs and all that, Gary.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
So Tony Burns was an amazing man, for what he done. I don't think he got the recognition for what he done, because he would take a young boy, take him underneath his wing, and if they showed a bit of promise and are willing to, learn, and they wanted to, get on in life, he had a removal company, and he'd give them jobs, but he'd get other companies to give him jobs as well.
Yeah,
a boy that was, because he wanted them to live right. And so not only is he preparing them for the ring, he's preparing them for life. So yeah, no, Tony was an amazing man. He was an amazing man.
He was also Reggie Cray's best man, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He used to go and visit him quite a lot. He used to go and visit Reggie quite a lot, apparently. But towards the end of his life, he'd become unwell with Alzheimer's, which was sad.
Yeah.
Sad. But he had a good boxing career himself as an amateur. He boxed for Wales.
Right. A couple of questions. My granddad used to spar with Jack Solomon. I didn't know that, mate. You have to tell me about that, Fergal, when I see you. You think the traditional Cockney accent will ever get sacked? Well, funny enough, we were speaking about that about an hour ago. He's basically asking about the Cockney accent. So can you explain to the viewers, Gary, the East Ender and the Mockney? So the real one from Mile End, Stepney, Poplar, to the one from Barking or somewhere. Yeah.
So it's completely different. So I will know just by someone talking. My hearing will just pick it up. I could be turned one way, and I know someone talking if they're from the East End. And also, I'll also hear if you're not from the East End. Even as, the East End is only a small place. It's only 4 postcodes. It's E1, E2, E3 and E14. Across the Bow flyover, right, is the River Lee. So, across the River Lee, you've got places like Canning Town. I can even tell someone who speaks differently from Canning Town, because it's got a completely different tone to it. And so, I mean, in Essex, it's very dramatised. So I speak how I speak, but they will go like, they will really put it on, and, and you just go, it's very, very Mockney. And
so is it kind of like This Is Essex, like shut up and all that?
Yeah. And my granddad's brother's cousin's sister's aunt used to be with the Crays. Everyone in Essex, I guarantee you, will give you a story about the Crays. Yeah, my granddad's brother's uncle's cousin was related, and how many people was in the Blind Beggar that night?
12.
Jeez, yeah, but listen, according to my granddad's cousin was there, my granddad was there, my brother's cousin's uncle's aunt was there. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. But a lot of people did move out of the East End. Do you know what I mean?
But do you think that was like the 70s and the 80s when people started going to Kent and all this?
Yeah, so people from the East End moved to Essex. They would go to places like Dagenham, these new towns in the 60s and 70s. They would go to Essex. And people from South London, Bermondsey, they go to Kent. Yeah. So, you got, people out in Essex that, once upon a time, their granddad, and a lot of them don't know the East End. They say, yeah, my granddad's from the East End. He come from Leighton. I'm like, okay. Because the East End is completely two different places, East End and East London. It's two completely different places. Do you know what I mean? So it's like the West End. So the West End of the city gates, that's how the West End grew up, the nightlife and all that. But the West London is a big place. You wouldn't call all parts of West London the West End, because you it's miles away. It's like, the East End. You wouldn't call all parts of East London, East London the East End, because it's not. It grew up on the East End of the city gates.
Right.
But as far as the accent,
any stories about Abbey Road Music Studios in that? Was it the East End?
No, Abbey Road, that's West London.
Right.
So that's West London. That's around the back of the zoo, Regent's Park.
Right. I tell you what, Gary. What I've been really amazed with, I've been studying Whitechapel for the last couple of months, and it's the amount of people from there I didn't know. People like Ashley Cole, Mickey Flanagan, who was born in Whitechapel, but I think he grew up in Bethnal Green.
Yeah, Columbia Road.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, Jack Spot, Comer, so there's a lot of people, huge Jewish community back in 100 odd. Is it still the same now? Obviously, we know we have every multicultural society on Whitechapel High Street. What's your opinions? Does it hurt you, or are you one of them people who think 21st century?
So it's always been a multicultural melting pot. People come there for hundreds of years. Every nationality. So it's no different. It's always been that way. So you had Jews, Irish, West Indians, Pakistanis, Indians, Bangladeshis. It's always been that way. People have always settled there because it was cheap. It won't happen anymore because it's really expensive to live there. But basically, it was a ghetto. And, it was cheap to get a room. And if you could work a machine or a presser, because you had the rag trade making all the clothes for the high street stores. So if you could do all that, you'd get a job. And so people gravitated to there because it was cheap. There was lots of work. So, but the East End accent, just to get back on that, I'm probably the last generation that speaks, of my age group, that actually speaks with a Cockney accent.
Could you speak fluent Cockney rhyme and slang? Because
it's a dialect that changes, but it's a local thing. So I could be talking to people I grew up with, and I could say something, you wouldn't have a clue what I was talking about, but they would. So it's a dialect that's evolved. So I could say, I'm not going to explain it, but I just work because it's too long. But I could be sitting there, and one of my pals is there, and I'll go, he's regging it up. You won't have a clue what I was talking about, but he would know exactly what I'm talking about.
I can't even understand people from Newcastle, so I wouldn't have a clue about
that. Yeah. So it's a dialect but the old one, apples and pears and all that, that people was probably talking like that, hundreds of years ago. And it was a dialect. They only spoke like it, and it come from the costermongers, the stallholders, because, you had Petticoat Lane. So you've got Sunday markets all over the country now, ain't you? There's always a Sunday market being advertised. But that stems from Petticoat Lane because the Jews wouldn't work on a Sabbath, on a Saturday. So they would work on a Sunday. So then you have Brick Lane, all the stall, the markets. That's how we get Sunday markets, because the Jews wouldn't work on a Sabbath. But so it was a costermonger's way of talking. So no one knew what they was talking about. Do you know what I mean? Especially criminals as well. They could talk in front of old Bill and they wouldn't have a clue.
Well, do Do you know Frederick Inspector Aberline? He was only posted to Whitechapel because he could speak fluent Cockney rhyming slang. So you know, I totally get that. You know, to the criminals, if you're talking about Vera Lynn or just stuff like that, you'd be sat thinking, do you know what I mean? Where in Frederick Aberline, he knew and he was on their wavelength. And the East End has always been rich in you don't grasp, you don't talk to the coppers. So he was kind of someone that even the criminals respected. So that was how he come into Whitechapel. But you know, I mean, football wise, I mean, I was shocked. I thought West Ham was in East End, but you said to me, do you want to explain the only team who was kind of in the East End is?
So I have to be truthful, and I will be truthful. So I'm a West Ham supporter, and I've supported West Ham all my life. But West Ham's not actually an East End football club. It's they come out of the ironworks. That's why they're called the irons, the hammers, you know, beating the metal of the ships. And so they started in East London. And there's a big rivalry between West Ham and Millwall. And there always have been. I don't know if you know about it, but there's been murders. You know, people have died through fans fighting, and but they're the only. This is hurting me to say this. They're the only original East End club. They was formed out of the docks in Millwall, which is now ran by Canary Wharf. So Millwall is an actual place, and so they started off there. And then they moved to South London. So East London, South London don't like each other. You know, there's always been that bit of hatred. But yeah, I'm saying this: Millwall are the only original East End club.
Because on Wikipedia it says out of the 13 London clubs, there's 3 East Ends: Leyton Orient, Dagenham and Redbridge, and West Ham. So in truth, them 3.
No, Dagenham and Redbridge is actually in Dagenham. Leyton Orient's actually in Leyton, which is East London, and Millwall's now in South London. But they originated from Millwall on which is now Canary Wharf, around that area, the docks. It was all dockers formed a football team, and then they went on to form, you know, Millwall as we know Millwall now.
Is this? Who brings right? So a question for you: who brings more modern day attention tourism to the East End, the Craze or Jack the Ripper? I probably would say it's 50-50, wouldn't you?
I would say more Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I'd say more Jack the Ripper.
You know, if you walk around Aldgate at 6-7 o'clock. You will see 5 to 6, maybe more sometimes, official registered Jack the Ripper tour guides, and they make their living. Many of them will be dressed in Victorian clothes, and they make their living talking about Jack the Ripper. It's unbelievable.
I've seen him. I've watched them all my life, but it used to be. So there's more people doing it now. Maybe, you know, when I was growing up as a kid, maybe there was one. And he would be walking along with maybe 100 people. Now you see him.
You know, that was. I'll tell you who that was. It was Colin Fido, and he died a couple of years ago. But he was the number one.
Was he the tall Jewish bloke?
Yes, he was Jewish. Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, I know the bloke you mean. Yeah. But so yeah, there was just one. But now you just see small groups. There might be 20, 25, 30 in it. But yeah, back in the day, it's always gone on. It's always gone on.
It's not something that's going to end anytime soon. And listen, I've been a lot of times in the East End. There's Jack the Chipper fish and chip shops. There's Jack the Clipper barbers.
Yeah.
There's Jack the Ripper museums. It's not going to stop.
These have only come about in the last 10 years. There was no Jack the Chipper. There was no museum. The museum is actually in Cable Street. Do you know how Cable? Well, it's Cable Street. So do you know the name? It's Whitechapel Wapping's on the other side of the highway.
Right.
So
Okay.
our Cable Street gets its name. So it's a very long road.
Yeah.
And so the ships needed somewhere to stretch out the cable, the rope. So that, you know, because they was making so much, it had to be so long. So they used to have cables, and that's how you get the name Cable Street, because they used to measure out their ropes there.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that.
Do you know what? There's a lot of there's so much. I mean, when I was in London for a week in June, and when I'm walking around Middlesbrough, I have my headphones in. But when I'm in London, I'm permanently looking because there's so much to take in. But it is slowly but surely disappearing. I'll give you one example, Gary. I was in Mitre Square about 3 years ago, and the original cobbles from the double event murder was there. I went back 6 months ago. It's all been done. So it is slowly but surely just disappearing. Is that something that makes you sad, or is it something that you just think, do you know what, it's the 21st century?
So I like going around the city, which the Mitre Square's in the city. I like walking around there because there's so much history around there as well.
Yeah.
And I walked around Mitre Square, and it's got a great big office block on it. I was like, wow, no care for history whatsoever, just wiped it out. You know, it doesn't look anything like what it did back in the 70s, 80s, even to the 90s. It don't look anything like it.
Yeah.
It does sadden me in a way. You know, it does sadden me because you're just wiping out history. And I love local history. So for me, yeah, it does sadden me, you know, and calling streets different names and things like that.
So a question from Darren Turner. Anything about Joseph Merritt? Now, the Elephant Man was actually born in Leicester, but he finished his days. So can you, I mean, I know, but can you tell us a little bit on Joseph Merritt, the Elephant Man?
Yeah, as you say, he lived in Leicester. He was born in Leicester. And to get money, he couldn't get a job and things like that. So he went in one of these curiosity booths, and he was traveling the world. And there was actually one opposite the London hospital. He was working in that, and the doctor in the London
hospital. Yeah.
Sorry?
It's a cerise shop now.
Yeah. And so he was in there, and the doctor come across him and was fascinated of what he see, as you know, from a doctor's point of view. And he took him into Whitechapel, got him a room. He wasn't a patient. He got him a room and just tried to help him, because there was nothing that could be done. You know, I suppose today, if a young kid
today it would have been sorted.
Yeah, but, if a young baby would have shown symptoms that he had, he'd get all the help. He wouldn't look like that.
Yeah.
But back then, he must have looked so strange. But yeah, there's a museum just around the back of the London Hospital where you can go and see the artifacts. There's his skeleton remains in there, his hat, his mask. Yeah, and a bit of the history of the hospital as well. The museum, I think.
Yeah, I've been in. He actually died when he was 31, and how he died was because the way he slept, because his head was so deformed.
That's right, he couldn't lie down properly.
But it's so sad, you know. And he made his living in that shop, 259 Whitechapel High Street, for 2 years before that doctor found him. So a few more questions for you, Gary. Any local theories on Jack the Ripper? My book is coming out. There's something about Whitechapel, so there's going to be a few in there. So Gary, can you tell me a bit about yourself? You've been on Sean Atwood a couple of times, but can you tell me what you do? Because a lot of people won't know. Who is Gary Hutton, and actually what do you do?
Okay, so Gary Hutton is someone that just wants to give back, basically. I just want to give back. That's all I do. So I'm a CEO and founder of a charity called Product of a Postcode. And the concept of that is that we're all a product of a postcode. Our mentors and our role models growing up start off in our postcodes, and we feed off of them. They introduce us to, you know, simple things as crossing the road. And we have to master these lessons in life. I'm your dad, Jamie, and I said to you, I'm going to help you cross the road. It's a life lesson. You must remember it throughout your life. You say, yes, Dad, of course. And then I take you to the side of the road and no cars come. We just stand there. We stand there for 5 minutes. No cars come. Then a lorry comes and we run. I drag you by the hand and run out in front of it. You think that's how you cross the road. So you go through life mastering running out in front of lorries because that's what you've been taught. Until one day you go through an extreme and you think, you know what, I'm going to press that green button like everyone else because they seem to have a lovely life. But you have to go through that extreme. So I went through that extreme. So I was one of 11 children. My parents was Irish immigrants and they settled in Whitechapel. And my mum actually worked in the brewery, in the bottling plant. And then the person that fathered me, he worked in there as well. And so in Truman's Brewery,
just seem to have lost Gary there. Hang fire, guys. I'm sure he'll come back. Yeah, I interviewed him earlier for my book. There's something about Whitechapel, and I was blown away. He's one of them people. I suppose I don't mean to sound as homosexual, but he's probably my ideal person. I'd love to be trapped in a lift with. So if you can come back, Gary, if you're still watching, mate. Are you back, Gary?
Yeah, back. Sorry, I don't know what happened then.
Right, yes, so your upbringing, you needed to earn a pound note, and the East End kind of, you were an East End lad, and it very much an East End boy.
I was a little street urchin, and so I was just, going around the streets looking for a pound note all the time. Yeah. And the person who fathered me, he had to give up work because my mum died when I was 7. The youngest was 18 months old, and the oldest was 15. So he had to give up work, but he was an alcoholic. And so I had to give him money every time that I got something. And so, when the person that's, meant to mold you is not telling you go to school, get as much academia as possible, I'm going there to eat because they're giving away free food. And I'm told if you don't go to school, you go in a children's home. Well, I was in a children's home. I didn't like it. I wanted to be with my siblings. So school was just somewhere to go and play football and eat. That was it. And so, yeah, I took the path of crime. I ended up going to prison. I was on the front page of the News of the World for £5 million. I ended up going to prison. But then, I thought it was a macho thing, being violent. I mean, the first time I got stabbed, I was 10 years of age, and that was by my sister. It was safer to be out on the street than in my house because I grew up with 11 people suffering with trauma. And so all your choices around trauma and violence just follows trauma. And so I thought it was macho, rapist nonsense, beat them up and all that. I thought that was great. But my subconscious was hiding something from me. And I ended up in a padded cell in a straitjacket, being pumped with Largactil to control me. I was gone. I was completely, and I done solitary confinement by myself. I just said, shut the door if you want to feed me. Because there was too much going on in my head. But it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because it made me change my life completely. So I wrote a book, Product of a Postcode. Gary Hutton, E1, a true life story to be shared. And I donated all the money to a charity I set up. So we go into schools talking to young people. Sorry to
interrupt, Gary. When I'm finished, I'm going to put all the links for Gary's registered charities and the books. But can you just explain to people watching what's the book about?
So it's about a life, about choices, how we make choices, how choices in our life come about. Is it really, if my mum didn't die, would I have ended up doing what I was doing? No. So it's about circumstances in life and how we deal with the circumstances. So basically, I wanted to write a book to tell my sister's story. In a youth centre by Christchurch. It was a centre for kids that bunked off school in the day. She actually worked there. So I wanted to tell my sister's story. So I had to throw a bit of my life in. But some people have read it in 24 hours. They can't put it down because it's so gripping. Sometimes I think to myself, well, did I write that? But yeah, the reviews are amazing on it. But it's just a story about dysfunction and trauma and how your life, what paths you take because of certain things going on in your life and the people around you. But yeah, it's a very interesting book. So a lot of people, psychiatrists absolutely love it because it gives them an insight into a young dysfunctional person's mind. I do stuff with now people that are doing doctorates in criminology and psychology. So when they're coming to their thesis, they do it on me, and I help them give them a better understanding of why criminals are the way they are. See, you could blacken our face out, and we could be talking about crime, and I could be anybody because we've all lived the same life. We've all suffered trauma. Prison is full of product of a postcodes. But some people want to glamorize it and go, yeah, I'm a gangster, I'm a villain. Like, don't be stupid. There's too many people that's gone to prison to be doing that. Do you know what I mean? So it's a wasted life. So that's basically what it's about, a wasted life and choices and things like that.
Yeah.
With some crazy stories.
You run a couple of pages. So if anyone's watching this, how can they get in touch with Gary Hutton? Can you tell us about your East End pages? Because essentially that's how I kind of found you.
Yeah.
I know we spoke a couple of months ago, and I thought I'm going to come back to that guy. And obviously, I got Christmas out of the way. I'm writing 4 books at once now. So I get up and my addiction is books, my work, because when I stop and I get drunk, I do stupid things. So my addiction, if you like, is work. And when I spoke to you a couple of hours ago, I was like, wow, I need to do some of this guy. But your pages, can you tell us about them? Because I'm going to put the links in here.
Yeah. So one of them's Whitechapel, born and bred. And so, being born and bred there, there's not much Jack the Ripper stuff on there because people that are born and bred there, they're not really interested in it. So it's more of the local history, street names, buildings, organisations that started there, famous people that lived there, street names. It's more about the local history and the history of Whitechapel. Sometimes there's stories of Brick Lane I might come across. I think that's interesting. Do you know what I mean? I might get into it. But predominantly it's more about the history of the area. And there's so much history in it. And then, so that's Whitechapel, born and bred. And then I grew up in the East End, not East London, which is a little bugbear of mine, whereby, people say, yeah, I'm from the East End. They tell you they live in Canning Town, West Ham, Plaistow and all that. And you don't. You're actually from East London. So that's why it's called that. And that's, again, a wider history of the whole of the East End and how it grew, how it come about, and just the history of it all. There's just so much history. It's unreal. There's just so much of it. And knowing what I do, when I walk about, I love it because, I know so much about it. It's great. And one of the things that I would say to you is, you've walked around Whitechapel, but you ain't walked around Whitechapel until you walk around Whitechapel with me. Because I will show you things that, you'd be like, wow, street names, it's just a wealth of information. I love it. And, it's become my passion, but it helps me from my work. So my work is working with dysfunctional young people. And sometimes, I sit in a dark room when I come home. Like I work in young offenders, prisons, children's homes, social services, yachts, young offending teams, probation, all sorts of things. And so it can be a bit much. So to calm myself down and take my mind off it, I start looking into history of the East End. So that's what I do, just to take my mind off of it. And then I've got another thing that I do called London Giving. London Giving is a social media page for people to give back. So we go out predominantly weekends when it's really, really cold. We go out quite a few times over the week. And so we put up a wish list, an Amazon wish list, and people can buy stuff, socks, gloves, hats, glove warmers, sleeping bags. There's a whole list of what they can buy, biscuits, whatever. And then we get someone to make hot food and we go and give it out all across London. So we go for the busy places, like where the nightlife is, because that's where the homeless people go, I'm afraid, you know. And the Bible shop, there's half a dozen people out there every day you go there, even more sometimes, because it's so busy and it's 24 hours a day. They'll always get a couple of quid off someone, you know what I mean, for a hot drink or, you know, whatever they're doing. So, yeah, I do that as well. But, yeah, I started Produce Code to charity in 2014. I've done a boxing venture for 20 young people, put them in a gym for 10 weeks, got them fit, worked on their diet, and they fought at Bethnal Green in York Hall. And, you know, it was such a buzz for them. They was like professional boxers. There's no chance of someone training for 10 weeks and box at York Hall. But, yeah, it was a great night. So, yeah, I've done a lot with a charity. But it's just my passion to help people. I would do anything to help anyone.
There's a question here. So Fergal's asking, Bill Maloney Pie and Mash films. Have you heard of it?
Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. He's got a YouTube channel, isn't he?
I don't know. I'm gonna. If he has, I'm gonna subscribe because it's very much my thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, after talking to yourself, I'm gonna do a YouTube channel. Where
you know what? Well, I can help you, and we can talk after this.
Yeah.
But do you know what? I mean, I'm gonna be ringing Sean Atwood tonight, and are you been on Sean's twice?
Yeah.
And Sean was got you on because of your life, but I've been on because I suppose I'm a bit of a career expert. I've got Jack the Ripper experts on, Charles Dickens experts coming on, but I think you're wasted, Gary. I think you need to go on Sean and just do the East End, because there's not many things I'm more interested in than the proper Cockney stuff. So have you got any plans on doing any more books, Gary?
So, yeah, I've got one book that's in the pipeline called Out the Darkness into the Light, about the transformation.
Of the East End?
Yeah. Yeah, of the East End of my life. Do you know what I mean? So it'd be like a dual thing. So, you know, me changing and the East End changing. So, yeah, it's like, you know, out the darkness into the light, because Whitechapel and the East End was a dark place at one time. And just how it's all developed and how I've developed my life. Just two similar things.
Yeah.
Out the darkness into the light.
Do you ever see kind of famous people on the East End? Because, I mean, every time I'm in Polici's, I always see famous people. I went for dinner a couple of years back with Chris Lambianu, but in there I've seen EastEnders actors, the woman who played Princess Diana in a film, the Wapping assassin Jimmy Flint. I seen Eric Hall, who died a year ago. The East End is always full of really famous people. You still see that? People
gravitate to it. For whatever reason, people gravitate to the East End, especially Polici's. Polici's is like, it's like an institution. You know, Neville, the dad had it, but he passed away sadly now.
But, do you know what, Gary? It got decorated in 1946, and it's never ever changed since then.
No,
so what you're seeing now is exactly how it was in 1946.
Yeah. So it's got a preservation order on it. Because it was made by an Italian carpenter who ended up in the East End, and so now it's got a preservation. It can never ever be changed.
No, it'll be a listed building.
Yeah,
but you know, there's so many proper East End Cockney traits. Tubby Isaacs I've featured in my book. I've had to do a lot of research. You know, if crack cocaine took over America in the 90s and crystal methers recently. Back in Jack the Ripper's day, it was gin. I'm not talking about gin like you'd buy. You're talking about stuff which would take your stomach off.
It would take the paint off your car.
Yeah.
It would take the paint off your car, because there was lots of gin houses. There was lots and lots of gin houses. That's how gin grew up and become famous. But basically, it was like what we would call hooch, what people make in the prison now.
Yeah.
And you know, you put a little bit of flavour in with it now. They put oranges and stuff with it, but basically, it's just like pure alcohol. Like you just put it in a bucket and make it.
I mean, do you know what I found out? People used to sell gin with straw, and you think, why would you do that? So gin was to get you blitzed, and the straw you would sleep on to sleep off your hangover. It's absolutely crazy. But there's so many traits, Gary. So if people, Jamie, have you read The Abyss? That was done by Jack London in 1901.
Brilliant.
And yeah, have you read it, Gary?
Yeah, I've read it. Yeah, and I've listened to the audio as well.
Right. So what's your opinion on that then?
I thought it was a great insight. But see, for me, when he's talking about people lining up outside a DOS house and things like that, I was seeing that in the 70s and 80s, around Booth House and Folgate Street. I was seeing that. So I could relate to it when I was reading it.
Gary, you've lost you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, you come back. Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, so when he's talking about people, they're queuing up outside a DOS house for the night to get a bed, I was seeing that in the 70s and the 80s in Folgate Street, Booth House and things like that, where they queue up to buy a bed for the night. And so, yeah, do you know where you get the expression for money for old rope?
Yeah, I've only found out the last couple of years. Yeah. But can you tell the viewers?
So in the DOS house, if all the bed was gone, they would tie a piece of rope to one wall and to another wall, and it was the penny lie over. So, and you'd lie over the rope and sleep, and it was money for old rope.
And hung over.
Yeah, hung over as well. Yeah, there's lots of sayings that have come out of the East End.
Oh, honestly, do you know what? Seriously, Gary, it's an education to talk to you. So if anyone's watching this now thinking, fucking hell, I want to see more of him, how can people get in touch with Gary Hutton? Because I'm hoping to do a few things with you this year. I'm going to speak to Sean Atwood tonight. I'd certainly love to publish your book, mate, if you're interested in a publisher. But how can people get in touch? What's the best way?
So I'm definitely 100% going to be doing a podcast. But yeah, if you just Google Gary Hutton, product of a postcode, you'll see it. But I must say one thing. So when you Google Gary Hutton, it will come up Gary Hutton, Mickey Flanagan. Because Mickey Flanagan done a joke about Gary Hutton.
Really?
Yeah, the most ambitious kid in the class wanted to drive a van. And the careers officer comes into the school and Hutton stood up, flash. And he says to the careers officer, I want to drive a van. And we said, Hutton, you dreamer. People from this school don't drive the van. They bring stuff to the van. I've never met Mickey Flanagan in my life, and I never went to school with him.
Wow. Really?
I'm the only Gary Hutton in the East End of London. Yeah.
Do you know what? Maybe he's heard the story of someone and thought, I'll make that into a joke.
I never spoke to a careers officer.
So one more question, Gary. I'm sure I remember. So about a person eating a banana skin off the floor. What's that about?
I don't know.
Right. Right. So yeah. So if anyone wants to get in contact with Gary Hutton, I could talk to you all day, mate. Wealth of knowledge. You're very much like Richard Jones, Jack the Ripper expert. Yeah. So how can people kind of reach out to you?
Just Google me on Google. Just Google Gary Hutton, product of a postcode. A link will come up, or a phone number will come up. If you go to productofapostcode.org, the charity's website, my number's on there. You can email me, contact me. Yeah, you just contact me. Social media.
I mean, do you know what? Seriously, I think there's a load of books in you. I really, really do. Have you? So you've done one book. I mean, writing's addictive. I was only supposed to do one, and here I've just released my 20th one last month. And if no one shoots me, or I get a lot of trolls and that. But if I'm still about, I'm going to do 100 books because it is addictive. So have you just done the one, or are you going to plan on doing a load?
I just done the one, and it come out in 2014, and there's a great story behind it, but I won't go into it. But I didn't want the money. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want the money. I didn't want to, you know, I even said to someone, I don't even want to do media. I don't want nothing to do with it. You know, I just wanted to get that story out there, and it got out there. It helped lots of people understand their dysfunctional lives. So I've got no aspirations to write loads and loads of books. But you're right, there's loads of books in me. I can write loads of books. But maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm not too sure. I just want to help people. That's all I want to do. But
yeah. Well, I'm going to put all the links in this video when you're finished. So you're going to send me in a couple of minutes. And just the last word on Whitechapel. Today, 2022, 21st century. What's it about? What's the future for the place? Where's it going? What does it mean to you?
Do you know what? It's the most amazing place in the world. And for years,
I agree.
Yeah, for years, it didn't get the recognition of what an amazing place it actually is. And it's only when you get older, you appreciate it. The history, it's a wealth of history. And as you get older, you appreciate it. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate it. Anyone that wants to get into history, social history, just go to Whitechapel. It's there. It's there. Sorry, that charity that I was talking about was called PDSA, the Animal Sanctuary, PDSA. That's what it's called. Sorry, but yeah.
Oh, of course, right.
Yeah, so that grew up out of Whitechapel and poverty. A rich, you know, a middle class person was like, I want to go and help the poor and downtrodden, and then end up opening a charity for their animals.
And of course, Vidal Sassoon came from Whitechapel.
Vidal Sassoon from Whitechapel.
So
Billy Ocean, you know, the singer, European Caribbean Queen. That one, he done a Hollywood blockbuster. But see that Caribbean Queen, it was originally on a white record called European Queen, and his brother played it to us when we was younger, and we said, "No, that's no good." He changed one word, Caribbean Queen, and it became a worldwide hit. But it was originally written as European Queen.
Unbelievable. So this podcast, Gary, what are you going to call it, and when's it going to start? Because you've only got one subscriber. I would watch it religiously if you're going to talk about lots of London East End stuff. So,
Product of a Postcode. There is a YouTube channel sitting there for me to do it. Product of a Postcode, and Product of a Postcode will be about, you know, East End life, everything that's gone on, history. I'll do lots of filming out and things like that. But there's a film on there now that I've done for knife crime. So I'm an award-winning documentary maker on knife crime, and I tell you what, I'm going to watch that tonight. It's sad. It really is sad. It's a sad story. But yeah, so that won a National Charity Film Award, and it got the young person, because the young person, he come to me, said, "I want to make a documentary about your life." And I said, "No, you don't." I said, "We're going to make a documentary about knife crime." He said, "Okay, then." And he got a place in university down to that film. Wow. Right. Yeah. Well, do you know what, Gary? It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm off to Scotland tomorrow. Even with Alan Thompson. But when I'm back next week, mate, I'm going to give you a ring. I'm going to put all the links in this. So if anyone wants to get in touch with Gary Hutton, one of the most interesting people I've come across in a few years, click on the bio to this video and you can... Sorry, what were you going to say? I'll tell you what we'll do. If you and Sean can get down to Whitechapel, we'll do a live podcast of me giving you a tour. Right. I tell you what, when I ring him in the next half an hour, I'm going to suggest that. And I'm going to send you mine that me and Sean done about 6 months ago. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Gary, and I'll give you a ring next week. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks very much. Please don't forget to click and subscribe. God bless. Thanks for your time, Gary. Nice one, mate. Speak to you soon.